So the name of the project is called Deconstruct, Reconstruct. It's about decolonizing our way of thinking as in migration, and bead weaving a story, basically. So the work that I'm doing right now is making clay beads, and I'm also going to bead weave those together and then paint a map on it. I am also working on a pair of moccasins that inspired me by my great-grandmother, who they lived on a reservation, my mom and her siblings and her mom, and sometimes they didn't have money for shoes during the summer, so then she would actually make them moccasins out of the flour sack fabric that they would have delivered during when the government would drop off their commodity or rations to them, so they would save all the fabric. So my work started off by bead weaving stories. Since I am Navajo, part Navajo, weaving is a way of, that's the Navajo way. You weave, you create, you have sheep, you card your yarn, you weave with it, you dye it, right? I decided to tell my story instead through beadwork. Now I'm telling a different story, telling about ancestry and migration. The cactus represents me. The roots are hanging because there's no earth. I have no connection yet. And so it's about me trying to find that connection to the traditions of where I come from. The clay beads came about because my mom had a memory of them when they lived on the reservation by the river, that my grandmother would actually harvest these, she doesn't remember what they were, these seeds from a tree, and they would burn them, grind them, boil them, and create ink. And she had memories of her grandmother painting pots that they made. And so the clay map is an ode to also my grandmother. I'm making the clay beads myself with help from my friend. And so that's we're making the clay. I went up to New Mexico, bought different kinds of clay that's all through New Mexico. So it's kind of like also a map about the terrain and the earth from there, and how my ancestors came from up north down to here. And so that's why the map is clay beads. And then I will be painting the map also, just kind of like the idea of my grandmother painting pots. Well, I mean, of course, the funds to get the materials, to have someone help you, to fire the clay beads, to buy the materials, also for to source the fabric, the flour sack fabric. The one I use for the moccasins is actually from the 1950s that I found. I also took a class through the Institute of American Indian Arts. It helped just pay for simple things just so that I could keep going, to take those days off to be able to work. I guess adding would be, I had no idea that I was Navajo and Apache till later in my life, and that was a huge, trying to process, thinking you grew up, you were Mexican growing up, but then realizing you don't do anything that's traditionally Mexican, and you wonder, why don't we do these things? And so this is an addition to picking up where my aunt, my grandmother, my great-grandmother left off, and I'm adding now the traditional part for making up all those years that I didn't know who I was. It's actually painful to find out later in life who you really are. And then now I feel like it's my job, or I feel it in me to do this, to explain that migration is a human right, and that we living on a reservation and being put there is unjustified, or it's cruel, compassion, and maybe their search into their own history to find out what their ancestors did, what their ancestors went through. And being here in El Paso, I feel like there's a lot of us that have that story here, not just here, but also in Juárez, because it is that connection. We have the oldest route here, El Camino de Real del Adentro, that was here already before colonization or being colonized, right? So that's one huge part. And also for me, it's like telling the story, and then I've told the story, now I can do the next art piece that I want to work on. So.